All right, hello everyone. So for today's video, we're gonna do another motion from Linkbait, which I really liked. Yeah. So let's just look at the info side and the motion, and then I can start the time. Financialization refers to the increasing influence of financial markets, motives, and institutions in various aspects of society, including traditionally non-financial sectors. In this context, the financialization of religious institutions, churches, mosques, and other organized institutions of worship, refers to the transformation of religious institutions into financial entities focused on profit making activities and investment strategies. Examples include the Vatican Bank's investments in diverse assets and the emergence of Islamic banks adhering to Islamic principles on debt, interest, and investing. And the motion is this House regrets the financialization of religious institutions. All right, game. Ready to start time? Let's go. All right, so I think it's a fantastic motion. There's so much to cover. And if I were closing government for this debate, I would indeed be very intimidated by the amount of material and the difficulty of choosing which material I would want to run. Like it's a happy problem because there's a lot of stuff that you could probably say. But I'm not so sure now as to what I'd want to prioritize and the strategy is. So let's just go through my thinking process. Right now, I'm already worried. Ops best arguments might include the following. They will say that financialization made more money, then more money means more charity. And they could make like a very compelling argument, to say that religions fill in the space that states, who are often discriminatory, fail to fill. So like they're just gonna make a really good argument as to why financialization is like a precondition for more money, and religious institutions becoming more organized in this particular way, attaining a lot more money, allows individuals to, like in poverty, like in places that the state directly or indirectly fails to be able to serve, is going to be worse. And then they could like make many mechanisms here, like international networks. Money is just a great thing. Even if like religions are very like, indoctrinating and they're very coercive, etc. So op will just go hardline and say more money is good. I think another really good argument that op could also explain is that like, religion exists on either side of the house, and so religion with more financial backing is better because it allows individuals to, or it guides individuals, rather guides individuals to proper religious adherent investing that is in accordance with their faith. So like they could also go hardline and say, yeah, we're fine with people, with religious institutions like providing more options of financing or alternative means of like investment, because investments that are approved by the Vatican, investments that are approved by the by Islam are perfectly good because it helps individuals attain the ultimate reality and the best thing, which is like, heaven, afterlife, or being more moral in and of itself. So I think opposition is quite strong here, and I think government, in as much as they could explain, like, even looking at the info side, even if they can explain like a few of the things, like, oh, financialization is just it makes religions more profit seeking rather than appreciating the value of religion in and of itself. It makes it less genuine, so they could double down on commercialization. They could make an argument that it makes religious institutions more expensive. I'm already worried that like these are the superficial arguments opening government can run, and they can do it very well, to be fair. But right now, I know that I should not only touch on those issues. So this is the setup. This is the context. I know that opposition will probably run these arguments. I also know that opening gov will run some of the, like they may or may not run an argument that says, oh, it doesn't appreciate religion as much, or this makes religions less accessible. Those are the impacts that they'd probably run along those lines. And right now I'm already thinking like, oh, so what stance am I necessarily taking at closing government here? And I'd want to use this as an exercise for all of you as well. What are the stances that I could possibly take? I could go anti-religion entirely, say that religion is bad XYZ, religion is bad for XYZ reasons, and if we can demonstrate that financialization made religions larger and more oppressive and more influential, then we win the debate. Because, like, obviously the counterfactual is that religion is less influential. Like, maybe that might be one. Like, it's kind of like a one-dimensional way of running an argument. It's like doubling down on this one issue entirely. Right now, I would, like, in other videos, I'm quite game to always do a hardline extension like this. But for this particular debate, given the way in which I've also framed the opening half discussion earlier, like the way in which opposition could run these massive, insane arguments on the endemic reality, how religion is just so meaningful in everyone's life, I think that given that the proving this counterfactual is not as meaningful for me, or it's not going to be that strategic, it's not always going to be good all the time, doing a hardline extension saying that religion is going to be bad entirely all the time is not always the strategic one for me. Because I also know, so it doesn't necessarily depend on OG, right? OG can still do the argument that, like, OG says religion can be good, but it's not going to be as genuine as it is before. And I could still double down on this anti-religion extension. I don't think that's necessarily inherently contradictory. But so that's not the reason why I wouldn't do it. The reason why I wouldn't do it is really just because I know that this way of winning the debate is too much of a risk, that it does not necessitate that I do this hardline stance. So the second stance that I would likely do instead, and this is already my rationalization as to why this is the case, is I would simply say that financialization has emphasized the worst aspects of religion, and it has allowed organized religions to capture influence in political and economic systems. Now I think this is fantastic. Now I know that I could still say that religion could be good in some instances, but I want to focus on, and this is really the exercise that you could also do, the debate is on financialization. The debate is on the way in which financialization has changed religion, the way in which it changes its incentives, and the way in which religion, in some sense, becomes more corrupt. So it's kind of like running the argument of OG, which is that, like, oh, it's going to be less genuine. But in closing gov, I would double down on, like, why, in the best case of opposition, even if they have had more money for more charity, this also means that they're able to capture and hijack and supersede and take control over political and economic systems, which may not always be good. Now, that's obviously the debatable part of the debate. I can make a framing on that later on. I could explain why this is particularly bad. But I already know that there are, like, a few parts of the argument that I might want to emphasize here. Like, I know I want to use the example of the Vatican Bank and its increasing wealth gap as a consequence of it being tied to stockholders and shares in perverse industries, right? Because that's an example that at least highlights and reveals a lot of the incentive mechanisms as to why they structurally become more corrupt, because of the people that they deal with and because of the way in which they have to deal and compromise their operations in order to earn more money or to invest more money in particular companies that they think are going to earn more money, right? Even if they're well-intentioned, right? Because the fact is, for earning more money for the poor and for charity, they need to do XYZ, which also changes the value system of organized religions. That might be one way to make this mechanism. But the other way is simply just to say that, like, even in the best case, where they have more money for more investing, and more control over the guidance and financial actions of individual followers, they outcompete and essentially monopolize investment options, because you can't go anywhere else, right? And banks have an incentive to integrate with religious leaning banks, because it also increases their followership, their user base, etc., etc. So I already know that, like, yeah, that's a great mechanism. I can also focus on that. There's just a lot more way, a larger way in which they control the lives of people through controlling the lives of political and economic states. So um there might be another mechanism that I might use here. It's increased their capacity for lobbying in illicit ways, right? So like the leverage that they have, the debts they hold, the um the debts they hold, or um are able to spread, etc. And that they become too big to fail as a consequence of being supported by multiple religious institutions, which is spinning the mechanism of op that it will just be supported very well. Um, so I want to note that, like, when I'm thinking about this extension, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm anti-religion entirely. It actually just means that at the end of the argument, what's necessary is that what's necessary the argument necessary at the end of the argument. I want to say that states having more influence and control is a good thing in this particular instance, right? So like the counterfactual for me, I already know maybe this could be a second potential argument that I could probably run. I'm really liking this argument now, is that like the financialization of religious institutions has stalled the transition to democracy and and secular free speech, and has instead propped up more authoritarian religious states across the world. So I think this is fantastic. This might be one way. It's really a fun way to discover the argument. I started the argument or the brainstorming process by thinking that, yeah, the debate could be about why states would have been better without the control or being hijacked by religious institutions. But in the process of thinking that, I have to think of it historically. And if religions did not have the lobbying power that they otherwise would have, or the leverage, or the central bank power or the investment power that they have to influence the private market, or to be influenced by the private market, like the mutual reinforcing way that I mentioned here in this argument a while ago, I know that now my counterfactual should focus on why the state is more independent. It is able to promote individual investing from people, and it's held more to account, relatively more to account than anyone else. And here, obviously, these are the normal mechanisms on democracy that may be good. Generational change, even if it is a majority, it is one that is relatively more representative of the will of the people, etc. So there's a lot of fantastic things that I could probably explain here, that religious institutions stall this process. They incapacitate these governments, and they prop up particular leaders that are always going to be in favor, and give more tax breaks to religious institutions, and states do not have the leeway to, like, the bottom line is that states do not have the leeway to regulate religious institutions in the same way. So we cannot guarantee that religious institutions will always be benevolent all the time, unless it is taxed and held to the same financial scrutiny as any other institution in the state. So I think again, this doesn't depend on saying that religion is bad. It depends that the process of financialization, which could also be a fantastic argument too, that it's about the process of financialization. Maybe you could think about that later on. We already probably did that anyways. But now it's just a lot more detail on why um this is independent of the characterization that religion would have always been bad regardless, and then we could just focus on this particular exchange instead. So who do you have at the end of this prep time? A few things I would just emphasize. So maybe there's still more room. So right now we have some material that engages with the best case of op, which is the more money argument. We have one big argument that talks about why it emphasizes the worst aspects, and it's kind of like a process argument in the sense that financialization makes them capture political and economic systems. We also extended the impacting of this argument to talk about the counterfactual, why it leads to more undemocratic governments, and we could also elaborate on that as well. And then I think the mechanisms itself are actually quite important here. That they become too big to fail. That they monopolize these institutions, and they also change the incentives of those organized structures as well. Maybe there might still be more material to talk about how like it exposes these states to more financial crises. Maybe there's more arguments here on internal corruption. But I'm not that worried as of now, because I know that a lot of these arguments tend back to the same mechanisms anyways, and these are just other impacts that I could probably talk about. All right, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye bye.